So let me have a little bit of introduction of Lou, right? So who we are, Namartha, can you play the slides?
Hold on 1 second, sorry.
Yeah. So who we are the West Coast product people. And the purpose, when I saw them, when I was teaching them, so my main motive was like, let them lead and meet with the industry people. Because I spend my life, right, in this field. So the way I get to know Lou and everyone else, Lou Grubluski, connecting with them, talking to them, attending the conferences, saying hi, hello, staying, having them with me or joining their group, whatever they were suggesting. So that was the best way for me to learn and grow. So this is what I'm trying to I would say give away my or share my knowledge as well. Like, hey guys, come on, let's perform this way. This will help you to learn tons of things. Next slide. So this is what our group is actually. So this is us, Namartha, Carolina, and Daria. There's one more person who is the co-organizer, right? She's not here today. She's, I think, doing her apartment. She's shifting her apartment. Next slide. So yeah, there you go. Daria is the one is missing. Carolina, you have met, and Namartha. Next slide. And there we have Lou Rosenfeld. Okay, so I met with him when I was actually searching for mentors and looking for the community back in 2008 or 2009. But the formal interview is very simple. Like if you are in the field of UX, I'm dead sure you have read the book Information Architecture, right? And it's written by our very own Lou Rosenfeld, right? And he is the co-founder of Rosenfeld Media as well. In his own word, he is the publisher at Rosenfeld Media, podcasters, author, conference producer. I love his conferences. First of all, always the enterprise experiences that he introduced, I think, a couple of years ago. That was superb. Learned tons of things, and nobody was talking at that time the enterprise experience design. He's the one who actually brought this thing into the limelight. And the polar bear. So I did ask Lou what is all about. What's up with the polar bear? Please do let us know.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hi. And the polar bear is on the cover of the information architecture book that I co-wrote that first came out, and I'm going to feel very old saying this, in 1998, and is now in its fourth edition. And it is, it was an O'Reilly book, and O'Reilly is known by the animals that are engraved on the covers of their books. And so you've probably seen the animal covers.
Oh yeah.
And we don't get to choose. The authors have no choice. And so we are very, very relieved to get a polar bear and not something like a banana slug or a poison toad or something a little ugly.
Okay. Oh, mystery solved. Thank you.
People call it the polar bear book now.
Okay, mystery solved. I was like, do you need to choose your own animal or something? But now, thank you so much.
We got lucky.
Yes. All right, I will hand it over to Namartha, right? And she will, we prepared a couple of questions, Lou.
Sure.
And if you don't want to answer, just let us know.
All right.
Yeah, that's okay too. So we found a lot of information online about UN information architecture. So what we want to ask is, in your vast experience with UX design, particularly information architecture, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind when designing for current and future interfaces?
Can I suggest you stop the screen share so I could see you all?
Yeah, sure. Here you go.
Thank you very much. Although we still don't see, I don't know if I'm pronouncing
Sibyl,
it right.
Yeah. Hey, Sibyl, if you don't mind, can you turn on your camera? If you don't mind, and if it's okay.
And if not, that's no problem. So, okay, so the question is like, what's the most important thing to keep in mind when designing?
For current and future interfaces
Is
in terms of
the
information
question
architecture.
really about like how to future-proof your work, or just in general, whether your work is going to be used now, or I just want to make sure I'm clear on the question.
Well, mostly future proof, because the trends are changing so quickly, right? So traditional information architecture, I don't know if that holds the same weightage as it used to. So how do you future proof
So it's so
something?
interesting that you say that, because there's almost a real side discussion there about information architecture not having the relevance that it once had, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
think you're indicating, which it used to be in the information architecture community. We would hear that and we would go, "Oh dear, we're failures because nobody has that job title anymore," or whatever it might be. But I'm going to take a digression here, because it's interesting that um, people say information architecture is not as relevant now, and yet, what is information architecture about? It's about making it easier for people to find and use information. Is that less important now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I mean, everyone is welcome to have their own answer to that question. But for me, I know that there's exponentially more information now than there was even a few years ago. And
Totally.
and that the information is not necessarily getting easier to find or easier to use. And so we're often drawn away from the conceptual and toward what you could argue is almost the cosmetic, namely the interface. It's like saying the only important thing about a body is the skin,
Hmm.
and that a skeleton isn't really that important, because if the skin is attractive and so on, that the circulatory system is overrated. That the so I would say, if you want to truly future proof your work,
Mm-hmm.
the what is at the interface is important. How and but what is at the interface is fairly easy to change. You can change a color, you can change a typeface, you can make a text field larger or smaller, you can change something from a checkbox to a radio button. And I don't mean to diminish the interface design aspects, but they sit on top of a foundation that requires us to be able to manage content. That the objects that we are managing, those information objects that sit at the core of the systems that we're all building and designing and maintaining, that skeleton has to work for any interface. So we can dig into this a little bit more if you like, but I would hazard that if you want to future-proof something, it has to have a strong foundation that's designed to stand the test of time. So,
Sure.
think of an e-commerce site.
Mm-hmm.
An e-commerce site at its core is going to have a foundation of types of content to describe products. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
pricing information is one content object. Maybe an image of the product is another content object. Maybe reviews or other content objects. Now, you could
Mm-hmm.
take that e-commerce system and reskin it today and reskin it next year and redesign it the year after that. But at its foundation, it will fail if it doesn't have strong content objects, which is really information architecture.
Makes sense.
Okay,
Yes.
that makes complete sense. Yeah. So I think that question emanated more from, in today's world of information on demand, where everything is available as a spoken command, then what is the real importance of
I'd
that
say
information
that's
architecture
another
and what that's.
interface. If I say, Siri, I'd like to know, I'd like you to bring up reviews of the top selling science fiction title in Amazon.
Right.
That is no different than a search query.
Exactly.
And, or if I browsed through an interface without using my voice commands. But it's really, whichever interface, whether it's a voice interface or a text interface or whatever, a visual interface, it has to have the same skeleton, under the hood. The same. Well, that's mixing metaphors. It has to have the same skeleton. It has to have the same objects, content objects, to be made accessible, regardless of the interface. And one of the things I would also say is that we are being sold on the idea that AI is really going to solve so many problems for us. That we will be able to talk to systems, and that systems will talk back, and that we'll have productive conversations. And that is true to a degree. But there are certain things that AI, whether it's spoken interfaces or something else, cannot do. And things like understanding context and switching back and forth between content domains. If I talk to you about an area like sales, or if I talk to, if I talk to software, to AI about sales, tell me about the best sales. Does AI know if I'm talking about boats or deals at Amazon or Walmart?
Yeah.
Or there's probably 5 or 6 other contexts. And I think when you have AI in narrow domains where the language is well defined, it's quite effective. But that's not what the world is. And humans are switching contexts multiple times a moment.
All the time.
Exactly.
Yes. That's so true. That is absolutely true.
Hey, can I ask you to share if you could use your favorite voice interface, but I think it'd be easier to search Google. But share a picture. Can one of you do that for me? Who's going to do it?
Picture of what?
I'm sorry, what? Picture of what?
It's called pace layering diagram.
Pace
it?
layering diagram. Hold on.
Pace layer diagram.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Yes. Fashion, commerce. Okay. Thingy.
It looks like an onion.
Yes. Let me copy link address.
Are you getting it, Madhusri?
Yes, I got it, and I'm pasting in the link, in the chat link. If you can take a look at it there.
Oops. Let me see. I don't know if this is it, but let me bring it up. Yeah, Stuart Brand. That's it. So if you
Do you want me to share the screen?
let me give you a better link.
Okay.
Pace layer diagram.
Stuart Brand, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. So I'll give you a link. You can share it.
Fashion, commerce, infrastructure, governance, culture, and nature.
Oops.
Oh wow. Okay. Good.
Oh,
Super.
I gave you the wrong link. Clearly.
Oh, the first one you want me? No, I got it.
Oh,
Lou,
you got it. All right. Yeah. Why don't you
I'm
share
on the
that?
same page. The Long Now, right? The Long Now
Yeah.
Foundation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that should do it.
Yes.
So you'll share it?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So who here has seen this? besides Mudasir.
Beside Mudasir, all right?
All right, so I wanted to bring this up because Stuart Brand is a really interesting guy. He wrote How Buildings Learn, and fantastic book if you haven't seen it. He's one of the people behind what the hippies used to really was their Bible. It was called the Whole Earth Catalog back in the olden days, and then he now he helped found the Long Now Foundation. And what I love about this diagram, he talks about the fact that we often sort of see change in a very sort of black and white way. Things either change or they don't. And I wanted to bring this up to kind of get back to the issue of interface versus information architecture and so forth. But this model is really broader than that. So he's suggesting here that change happens at different paces in different parts of the universe. So if you look at the laws of nature in the core, in the center, they don't really change. They really, maybe, if you're around long enough, if you're around for 10 or 15 billion years, you might get the sense they do change, but that's unlikely. At the other end of the spectrum, things change all the time. They're highly dynamic. And fashion is his example of something that is constantly changing. And then there's gradations in between. So, the question about future proofing and is it information architecture or interaction design, or it's all these sort of binary yes or no's don't really get at the complexity of the world we live in, or even the industry we work in. So I want you to think about something like interaction design at the external layer that can be highly dynamic, which is good because certain things should change a lot.
Exactly.
And that there are things at the core that are important too, but they simply aren't as dynamic. And then there are things in between. So you might think about understanding user experience design or whatever you're studying or pursuing as having this type of layered using this type of layered model to understand and make sense of what you're working on. So I just want to throw it out there. It's
wonderful.
It's
This
really
is
useful.
good.
No, that is wonderful, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We move on to the next question. You recently did a Rosenfeld review named Conversations with Things, UX Design for Chat and Voice. What are your thoughts on the future of VUI?
Well, so here's my quandary. You may think I'm a UX expert, and that would be very nice and generous, and probably has more to do with my beard being white and me being around for a long time. But I'm not a practitioner. I'm no longer even an author of current content. I am a publisher of books and a producer of conferences. In other words, I get other people to do the hard work of writing and presenting and designing conference programs. And I sit back and wave and smile, and I'm a figurehead. So what you're referring to, I did a podcast with two of my authors of the newest book, Conversations with Things, which comes out on Thursday or Tuesday, I think it is. And that's Diana Dybel and Becca Evanhoe. And so they're the experts in that topic. I certainly know the book, helped produce it. I couldn't talk to you as an expert on that topic, but I can tell you that the book is really strong at sort of serving as almost like I like to think of it as the first of the new wave of books in this space. Like there are books out there on voice design and chatbot design and so forth. And, they were in those, I think a lot of those first generation books on the subjects were people who were new, like everyone was new. And so
Yes.
anyone with any experience, you only had to be 6 months ahead of everyone else, and that qualified you to write a
Right.
book. And that's not a knock,
Mhm.
but that's true
Mhm.
when an area is pretty new. I think what our authors did, now that this area is a few years old, is they did a really good job at stepping back, looking at a more mature practice, folding in some of the academic research, which practitioners were certainly not going to be interested in or ready for 3, 4, 5 years ago, and
Mhm.
also dealing with a lot of the better understood impacts of design for voice and for chat. There's a hell of a lot of problems that reflect the biases of the designers that maybe we should have understood 5 years ago that we understand a lot better now, and they've done a really good job of helping people avoid, designers avoid folding their own biases into how they design those experiences around chat and voice. That's a very elaborate dodge to say I'm not an expert, but hopefully that's helpful.
You did that very well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go back a little bit in time. At one point, you became infamous in internet circles by prognosticating, oh my God, that's a long word, the impending death of your then competitor Yahoo. You wrote the article in 1995 titled How the Double Whammy of Web Architecture and Information Retrieval Will Do Yahoo In.
That was
We'd
the
love to hear about it
subtitle.
from
Actually,
you.
the title was The Untimely Death of Yahoo, which is more
I don't want
fun.
to use that. Yes.
So, was I right or was I wrong? I was
Yeah.
predicting that. So you got to understand, back then, when people wanted to find information on the internet and on the web in particular, they used portals. A
Mhm.
portal
Totally.
at that
Yeah.
time was defined as a directory. It was a directory,
Mhm.
and my feeling was that that was never going to scale. That the human effort to create directories by uh, to provide topical access, browsable access, if you will, in a central way, wasn't going to work. And I was right. I mean, Yahoo tried and fell apart, and actually, more automated means like Google really kind of took over. And you can see the relative market capitalization of Yahoo versus the market capitalization of
Mhm.
Google, and they're a bit different. And you may not realize that I think it was at one point Yahoo had bid to buy Google when Yahoo was
Yeah.
big and Google was not.
Uh-huh.
So these things. I think whoever you know. As I mentioned to you a little earlier, I know that's in my Wikipedia profile, which I had nothing to do with, and somebody wrote that. I don't know whom, and they, I think, had a bigger axe to grind with me than whatever axe they perceived I had to grind with Yahoo.
Mhm.
That's very interesting.
And I don't know
But it's
who.
amazing that, yeah, at that point, internet itself was newer, during the Yahoo times.
Mhm.
And at that point, how did you kind of even know that, okay, that this is not going to work? Because it was a new concept even
Well,
then, what Yahoo search was doing, right?
I'm a librarian by training, and the basic classes that you take in library science are things like, you might find this interesting actually,
Hmm.
cataloging. And what's hard to
Okay.
do is to catalog things in a way, like books, let's say, in a way that the users of one collection of books, one library's collection, all can take advantage of. That the tagging, in effect, works for everyone. Because it's
Oh wow.
very subjective.
Oh,
And now
yeah.
try to do that for the world's population and
No.
content, okay?
You're gonna go
Doesn't
crazy.
really scale. Another thing we used to learn is how to do a reference interview, which is kind of interesting because when you're working at a reference desk, it's not entirely unlike brokering a search, except you have to. It's also not unlike understanding how to do a user study because you have to understand the user, the library patron, without and their potential bias without introducing your own bias. And there's a lot of
That is so
interesting
true.
concepts that come out of library science. That's why I got into this area in the first place. Because when I was a master's student in the late 1980s at the University of Michigan's School of Information Library Studies, they told us that the information explosion was just around the corner.
No.
And they told us how librarianship is important, but they never connected those two things.
Okay.
And
So true.
so
Yeah.
they were telling us about librarianship, but in libraries,
Mhm.
which is one context, but not the only. And
That's so true.
and I wanted to bring it to the internet,
Nice.
which is
All right.
yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit of ancient history. Carl,
So-
sorry.
Yeah, I have a question about what you were saying. It's so interesting. When you're saying about libraries and how you organize maybe collections, you have the physical book. So you need to categorize it at some point. Let's say it's something related to engineer, but maybe people from math are looking that book too. So how you categorize it on physical book? So this book could be in both. I mean, people from different perspectives can find that book. Because on the digital, I guess it's a little more easy because you could categorize same item in different levels or with different tags. But in physical world, I really don't know if that is possible or how
So
you do it.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, and if Namrata or Mudasir heard you better, could you make one of you maybe
I did.
restate it?
Yeah. So what Carolina's trying to ask is she's trying to understand how cataloging, digital cataloging is easier, right? Because you can apply multiple tags to the same content. But how does that translate into a library with physical books?
Oh,
Because
well,
you can't
yeah,
multiple
that's an
tags.
interesting question. So, for the
Yeah.
longest time, I mean, until we had digital systems, we had to rely on card catalogs, which could, potentially, the representation, the record was on paper, card, and you could have multiple versions of them, but they are expensive, basically, relative to when you have thousands or tens of thousands of items in a collection. It becomes expensive to create one card for each of one of those, much less multiple cards, multiple access points to each item. When we started to create digital catalogs, though, that got a lot easier. And the digital catalogs are ultimately what informed how systems like Google do their work in terms of, I mean, there is still metadata out there for every, HTML file, right? I mean, it's not purely full text. Google uses other types of information besides full text in their algorithm, and so it's easier for sure to do it in a fully digital environment. But back then, we did have digital for a while to work with books, and we still do have digital catalogs to help us provide access to printed material. I hope I'm not misinterpreting the question, though, Carl.
No, it's absolutely
Cool.
fine.
Yes, thank you. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Yeah, now I figured it out better.
Yeah.
That it's okay having the same item in different categories, even in the physical world. So thank you so much.
I'm still having a little bit of a hard time hearing, so if someone can repeat it for me.
She just said she understands it better now
Oh, great!
and said thank you too.
I'm glad, Carol.
Okay. Okay, so what does the future hold for you, Lou? You're now doing not just publishing, but you're highly involved now in conferences. You just mentioned you're organizing 4 this year,
Yeah.
and workshops.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Well, pretty excited. We're like, as I mentioned, or as you mentioned, we're launching a 4th conference on civic design,
Yeah.
and that's an area that I've just like since the beginning of the year. I've been on something of a listening tour, and I've talked with nearly 50 people who are involved in design in one type or another in the public sector, not just in the United States,
Hmm.
but different countries, different levels, federal or national governments, but also municipal, provincial, state. Talk to people at think tanks, talk to people in the private sector who do work for the public sector. And every time I talk with one additional person in that space, I'm blown away at how rich and complex and interesting and exciting that space is. And I'm personally a believer that we need, in order for humanity to basically survive into the next century, we need to have ways of working together and sharing the risks and rewards that the world gives us. And I think that means you have to have government. I think we have to have governments to work together and do things together as a society. And so I want government to work. And I see people coming out of design who are just already making a big difference. And I see people who are in government who don't come from design coming towards design. So there's this mutual approach to each other. And think about if like what a different world we would live in, and what a better world we would live in if we could share in in not just government services, but government services that really work, and government services that not only deliver but deliver efficiently and cost effectively. And I think you know it's like so many other areas where technology has been thrown at problems at great expense, and we're like a little bit of design, a tiny little bit of design relative to the technology spend would make so much of a difference um, think of like vaccine rollouts. I just read an article recently about, I think it was either Deloitte or KPMG got a huge contract to roll out a federal vaccine related service. And it was a no bid contract, and they got something like $50 million, and it
Wow.
failed because
Wow.
it was a technology play, and it was a manipulation. There were probably lobbyists involved, I'm sure. Um, if you had probably dropped $500,000 of design into that $50 million project, it would probably not only succeeded, but you could have probably done the whole project for $10 million. So we
Tot-
have a role. We have a role, and
Absolutely.
we're going to help.
tot-
We're going to stand up not only a conference, but all of our conferences have corresponding free communities, free content in those communities. I think Mood is here. You're familiar with them. We've been doing
yeah.
this for years, and it's a win-win relationship to have both like a conference we charge for, but that comes out of a community that we don't charge for, that we facilitate, that we pay people to curate. And that's what we're doing.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm excited about. And
Uh-huh.
scaling up the ability to curate all these communities and conferences all at the same time while putting out more books. It's a lot of work, but it's exciting. I love doing it. I have the
Can
best job
imagine.
in the world.
Nice.
One
So
other thing
now,
I will just say, I get to do tons of information architecture all day long. I work
long.
on book information architecture. I work on conference program information
Did we lost?
architecture. I work on, I mean, like that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Maybe
Okay.
you
Cool.
should consider
Hey,
teaching.
we're gonna wrap up, but we have a question from Lima. So this will be
Yeah,
the
Lena
Hi.
last
has a
question.
question.
Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering, like, there have been like concerns among people that a lot of the information we have now is digital, so we don't have actual records anymore. Like, what is your opinion and take on that?
You cut off a little bit, but the concern is that we have information that's primarily digital, and then what did you say after that?
And that it's not like on paper anymore. Like in a distant future, like how would people look back on today? That's
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
concerning.
it's not even just a distant thing. Think about elections. Think about ballots. You know, it's very hard to manipulate and hack paper ballots.
Totally.
Digital ballots are a whole other thing, right? And
Mm.
Yeah.
so it's not just an archival or historical issue. It's yeah, I mean, it's an issue in the moment. Every time we have an election and we keep moving to increasingly digital approaches, I'm worried about it. Um, I'm very much worried about it, but I also understand that there's a trade-off. So, if the library at Alexandria, which was, a paper or parchment-based library, had been digitized, we would have so much of the ancient world's knowledge at our disposal. Paper can be destroyed. It can't
Yeah.
Yeah.
be maybe hacked in the same way, but it certainly can be destroyed. And the library at Alexandria was burnt to the ground, and
Yeah.
everything
Mhm.
within it. So there's a trade-off, right? There's the access that digital gives us, and the backup that we get from
Hmm.
digital. But on the other hand, it's a bit disturbing because it's so eminently hackable. I don't know what the answer is. I wonder if any of you do, or at least have a better lead on an answer, if not the answer itself.
Mm.
What do you think, Lena?
Print everything out and waste a lot of trees
But where do you put it?
in a library.
But here's the thing. So, what do you put in that library? Because the amount of content being created is growing exponentially. But there's always some
Exponentially,
new
absolutely.
thing out there, some new quote that says more content was created in the last 10 years and in the rest of human history. So the hockey
Wow.
stick is going up, which is why I don't worry about the
Mhm.
future of IA. By the way, so what do you do? I don't know. I do think a lot of the digital data is too mundane to be hacked.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? Like my diary, if it was digital and it gets out there after I'm gone, is no one's going. Well, I don't know. They rewrote my wiki page, so but most stuff
Somebody
is not
cared.
that important. So I don't. It's a great question, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will probably have a hard time sleeping tonight, thanks to you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to contribute.
Nice. All right. I think it's 10:15 at Lou's end, right? So we should let him go. And before letting him go, I would like to thank you a lot, because you take some, time out from your busy schedule. And even though we are very few people showed up at meetup, but still, it's worth it.
I'm
Mhm.
grateful to you
Absolutely.
all. Thank you for indulging me for 45 minutes, and I hope we'll cross paths again.
Yes,
If
Lou,
we have
thank you
any
so
other
much.
sorry, if we have any other questions, can we get in touch with you
Oh,
or?
sure.
Of course.
Mudasir, well, I'll just put my email address in chat.
Sure.
Yay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
email is the
Lou
best.
is super awesome person, you can reach out to him whenever he get a chance in his busy schedule. He will, reply to you. So
Thank you.
when I was transitioning from software development to the UX field, Lou Jared Spool, Luke Rublewski, Whitney Hess. They were the I was looking to them actually, like they were the one who really helped me, and my mentor always mentioning them, and they were super friendly. I was scared because I was like, man, I heard the UX people are snobs, but then that's not true basically. For some, at least for Lou, not that's not true
Well,
for Lou.
we are naturally snobs, but we also are still insecure enough that we care what people say about us. So we wanted to make sure we didn't come off as snobs, I suppose. So well, thank you all.
Thank you so
for
much.
Great.
Superb night.
Thank you so much, Lou.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone, for coming. Bye bye.
Bye.